From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. If you are one of the 1.7 million people who live in Multnomah, Washington, or Clackamas counties, your life is touched in some way by Metro. So what exactly is Metro? 30 years ago, Metro became the nation's first directly elected regional government. It's charged with charting a future for the region by managing growth, infrastructure, and development issues. Metro manages 2 voter-approved initiatives to increase housing stability and end houselessness across Greater Portland. Metro manages 17,000 acres of parks, trails, and natural areas, and it runs the Oregon Zoo, Oregon Convention Center, Portland Expo Center, and Portland Centers for the Arts. It also manages the region's solid waste system. In this episode of Straight Talk, a conversation with the elected president of Metro, Lynn Peterson. Here's a little bit about her. She was elected to Metro in 2018 and re-elected in 2022. She began her political career as a city councilor in Lake Oswego from 2003 to 2006. She served as chair of the Clackamas County Commission from 2007 to 2011. She also served as transportation policy advisor for former Governor Kitzhaber and as head of the Washington Department of Transportation. Her recently published book, Roadways for People, Rethinking Transportation Planning and Engineering, is the #1 book on the topic on Amazon. And she recently announced she's running for the Democratic nomination for Congress in Oregon's 5th District in the 2024 election. And welcome to my guest, Metro President Lynn Peterson. Welcome to Straight Talk. Your first time here. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you heard me talk about Metro there. Is there anything else you want people to know about Metro?
You know, as the only elected regional government in the country, the way we look at it is that when people in this region, whether that's elected or advocates, are saying there is a problem in our region that has no boundaries to get to a solution, right? So whether it's been our land use and planning function or whether it is the recent work on affordable housing and the homeless measure that we're going to talk about, these issues were bubbling, and they're bubbling around in 3 counties or 23 cities. And when we need to find a solution, especially like on transportation, right, where nobody knows who owns what asset, we all come to Metro and we talk about how to make it a better place, a better solution for everybody.
And one of the most important issues that you're working on is addressing homelessness and housing. So let's talk about the 2 measures that voters passed generously. In 2018, they passed a $653 million bond and then $2.5 billion in 2020 for supportive housing services. Help us understand the difference between these 2 measures and how they're being used.
Right. So the first one, the Affordable Housing Bond Measure, we are working with the 7 housing authorities, the federally recognized housing authorities within the Portland metro region, and they are putting out and building and then having either they're operating themselves or operating through other nonprofits that have wraparound services housing for folks that need it. And there was a total deficit in this region of 45,000 units prior to COVID. And I'm sure there's a lot more, but our calculations prior to COVID were we needed 45,000 housing units that were affordable or low income. And so this measure, we promised the voters that we would try to get to 3,900 units. And right now we have about 1,000 that are constructed in the first several years, and the rest are either in permitting and construction, and we've spent about 60% or allocated 60% of the money. So we believe we're going to be able to get way more than the 3,900 units that we
President
had promised.
Peterson, let me say that we have a graphic that we can show folks that shows the construction underway and the ones that are left to be, as you talk more about. How do we get to that number? I mean, that's a lot of housing. We have a big deficit throughout the state.
Yeah. So our money through Metro, our region's money that we're putting in together, is kind of the last money in. So there's federal money, there's state money, and there's tax credits for the nonprofit developers, and all of that combined with the Metro money helped accelerate, get all of these projects out on the ground that were just kind of stuck because there wasn't enough money to finish the deal. So the 1,000 that are constructed are all over the region. We have had grand openings and ribbon cuttings for the last 4 or 5 years, whether it was virtual or whether it was in person. And luckily, we've got the 1,000 that are on the ground now, and the rest are in design and permitting. And that basically gets us to our 3,900 units, and we are hoping to get way more out of the rest of the money and be able to house even more. So I think we had originally thought that we would be able to house 10,000 people at a time, and now I believe we're at 12,000.
And beyond that, though, we need a lot more housing to catch up throughout the state and the region. So how do we get there? Yeah,
well, the rest of it is market rate housing. There is not enough for middle income folks to find housing. And that is making it so that they're buying up the affordable and low income houses to be able to stay inside the region and work and go to school, right? So what's happening is a lot of our low-income folks are being pushed out, and they're being pushed out into North Plains or to Yamhill County or down the Gorge or into Vancouver. And what we want to be able to see in the region is a lot more middle-income market rate housing being built as well. And there are a lot of barriers to that right now. And most of that is the cost of doing business at the city level. Our cities are struggling to be able to be the public-private partnership in order to get that housing done. They don't have enough planners, inspectors, permitters at the counter just to get things through. They don't have the SDCs. Their system development charges are extremely high in order to afford the water, the sewer, the roads, the parks. And then in some cases, a lot of the cities, talking to the mayor of Beaverton, she has a $10 million deficit in her budget right now. So she was very worried about any growth affecting the ability to provide police and fire if there were growth in her city. So these are the things that the cities are struggling with right now, and we call that land readiness. There are 18,000 acres of land within the urban growth boundary that the cities are not able to actually get developed because the land is not ready.
So no easy solution to
There
this.
is no easy solution. However, most states have a very good partnership with their state legislatures, and that partnership is what we're going to have to start to build up in order for us to be able to get that land ready for development, whether it's for residential or jobs.
Are you saying we don't have a good relationship between the cities and the legislature?
I would say that we need to work on understanding roles and responsibilities again. I think things have gotten convoluted and no one is at fault, but I think we need to have that partnership. Like, what is the responsibility of the state? How can the state help out in a housing crisis?
Now, what about the other measure, the supportive housing services measure? That's the $2.5 billion one.
Yeah, the supportive housing service measure, $2.5 billion over 10 years, so it's about $250 million a year over 10 years. And the goal was to end chronic homelessness. Now, that is not ending all homelessness, that's chronic. So if you're out on the street for over a year, 5 years, 10 years, right now you're chronic, and it is harder to move you off the street because you have become used to this way of life, and your mental health and your ability to move into an actual place is much more difficult. So it's for the really difficult cases. And what we have found is that it is not just, it's very flexible money. So what we've been able to do with that money is keep 10,000 people and families out of homelessness. So you have to stop the inflow as well as make sure that you are moving people out. And we've been able to provide, through the 3 counties, homes and supportive services now for about 2,500 people under that funding measure. That doesn't include all the funding.
Let me jump in here because I know there's probably a lot of viewers saying they believe what they see.
Yes.
And they look out and they see public camping, they see crime, vandalism, trash, graffiti, drug use, and they blame government.
Yes.
They don't see the results of the money that they spent. Are they wrong?
So Metro has no authority to actually do the implementation of the measure. We depend on the 3 counties. The 3 counties have a implementation plan that is approved not only by their county boards at all 3 counties, but by an oversight committee at the county level and an oversight committee at the Metro level and the Metro Council. Those implementation plans had a ramping up period, and we are in the first 24 months of that ramping up period. And it has been very difficult for a lot of different reasons, and it's no excuse. But the 3 counties have had a lot of caseworkers that were burned out over COVID who have left. and a lot of new folks that are coming in and getting trained. And it's, of course, difficult like every other field. There are just enough people working, right? We need people to come back into the workforce and get trained in this. But the other problem that we've had is we've had 3 counties that were in a scarcity resource model. And to move them out of that model has been very difficult.
Well, let me ask you about Multnomah County, because a lot has been made in the news about all the unspent money from this tax money in Multnomah County, tens of millions of dollars. Metro's in charge of being the watchdog and how that's allocated, but the money is not getting out the door, and I understand you have a corrective action plan with the county. How is the county and the chair, Jessica Vega Peterson, responding to that?
You know, I think the chair is doing a great job in her first 6 months here, digging in and finding out where those barriers are to actually getting the money out the door. In some cases, it is just as, she's been spending a lot of time just on like procurement and contracting, which has been kind of an old model of doing business when you didn't have a whole lot of money flowing through. Now that you do have a whole lot of money flowing through, how can you get that money out the door quicker and get people paid, which was part of the problem, as well as being able to give more money to existing organizations that are doing a good job. And so a lot of that is being taken care of, but they also have a lot of work that they're putting into new work that they are now able to move out the door based on the chair's direction and new innovative programs.
Do you think voters have a right to be upset that all the money that they put forward that they thought was going to be used to urgently address homelessness doesn't seem to be, that there doesn't seem to be a plan that Multnomah County had to address homelessness with all that money? Yeah,
I think like everybody else, wants this problem to be solved more quickly. There's an angst, there's an anxiety, right, that we all have, and it's on an empathy level because these folks need the help, but it's also on bringing back our city and being able to feel safe. I don't have a magic wand. After 40 years of disinvestment and a lot of policies that went sideways with COVID and sideways with all of the policies that came together at the same time, what I do know is that we are on it, and we are working very hard with all 3 counties to provide that oversight to get that money out the door as quickly as possible. What we've been saying, and it's an analogy that maybe some of our younger viewers don't know because it's about a manual drive car, but our counties have been able to get from first to second gear. It's getting into the third gear that they're having problems with, and they are right now actively addressing those problems. And so I am hopeful and optimistic that by the end of this year and going into next year, they will have fully functioning programs. But it took a lot to go from almost no resources in Clackamas County to a program, and from some resources in Washington County to a full program, and from a good program in Multnomah County to what we hope is a great program.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about transportation, because you've said one of your biggest professional disappointments is the failure of the transportation measure in 2020. It would have added a 0.75% tax to employers' payrolls and funded 150 projects on 17 designated corridors. How much responsibility do you take for its failure?
Well, you know, we were doing really well until COVID hit with our conversations with the community. And, you know, we went from a congested region that needed help to no congestion. And so that was a hard switch to make in a very short time period. We also ended up having a failure of communication between the business community and the coalition of interests that had come together from labor and environmental and racial equity groups. There was a breakdown of communication at the end, and what we knew is that we didn't want, it was too important to not put it on the ballot after all that work was done. But what it has led to, which I'm very happy about, is no one really questioned the content. Everybody had agreement around the projects. And so what's happened now is that everybody is moving forward with the contents of that ballot measure and trying to figure out how to fund it. And so that's the happy side of it, going through a ballot measure during COVID based on solving congestion that wasn't there. That was hard.
Do you think you'll try again with another measure?
I've really believe that at this point, a coalition of interests between business and environment and labor and racial equity groups is going to have to come together and have a conversation themselves about how to do that, because the issue is really about taxation. And that's a hard one to fix in Oregon.
Do you think people feel like they're overtaxed, especially in Multnomah County?
Yeah, no, 100% we hear that. So that's why this coalition needs to come together and really talk about how would that look going forward. In other states, almost every other state in the union, there's a sales tax. And that's how they usually fund these things, and we don't have that.
To find another way. Well, let me ask you about a tweet that Rene Gonzalez, the Portland City Commissioner, tweeted recently. He said that taxes from Metro and Multnomah County are in part what has led a lot of people to leave Multnomah County, and he cited an Oregonian report that said that counties lost $1 billion between 2020 and 2021 in income as people left the county, and he suggested that Metro and the county roll back some of their taxes. Good idea?
So one of the things that we're looking at right now is that this tax is based on high income, high business income earner tax. It's a little volatile. It's the first time we've done it. We're not sure how much it's going to bring in each year. And
which tax are you talking about?
The supportive housing service tax.
The $2.5 billion over 10 years.
Yep. Thank you for clarifying that. That tax, which is what the commissioner is talking about, we don't know, again, plus or minus how much it's going to bring in every year, and we want to make sure that we have enough to finish out the 10 years in order to end chronic homelessness. So we're going to be keeping an eye on it and really thinking about how we can be a part of the solution to reduce taxes if necessary. There are some conversations going on, but right now we need to monitor this so we can actually complete the goal of ending chronic homelessness, which I think everybody is in agreement needs to happen. And so if we can meet that, we will have conversations. It's not an easy topic, but it is something that I think the Metro Council is open to keeping an eye on. Well,
President Peterson, we need to take a break, but when we come back, I do want to ask you about the Interstate Bridge that I've been reporting on since I looked back 2005 when they started the Columbia River crossing. And also, President Peterson is running for Congress in the 5th District. We want to talk to her about that. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. We're talking with Lynn Peterson, the president of Metro, the area's regional government. And recently, Peterson announced she's running as a Democrat in Oregon's 5th congressional district in the 2024 election, hoping to unseat first-term Republican Lori Chavez-Dreamer, who defeated her Democratic opponent Jamie McLeod Skinner in the last election. Chavez-Dreamer flipped the district to GOP. It had previously been held for 7 terms by moderate Democrat Kurt Schrader. Welcome once again to my guest, Metro President Lynn Peterson. Thanks again for being here.
Of course, thank you.
We didn't get to the Interstate Bridge in the first segment, so I wanted to make sure we talk about that before we talk about your run for Congress, because as I mentioned, we've all heard about this Interstate Bridge replacement, or the Columbia River crossing as it was known between 2005 and 2013 before it was scrapped. You are a member of the steering committee, the executive steering group for the IBR project. Do you think this bridge is going to be built in our lifetimes?
Short answer, yes. But it has also followed me in my career for a very long time, and I actually had to close the office on the Washington side for the Columbia River crossing because the Republicans decided not to fund it in the budget up there. So I had to close the doors. But, you know, coming out of that conversation and the restart, I was so pleased to be back at Metro to be part of this conversation, and I was very pleased with the elected officials and the thought leaders from both sides and how we came together this time rather than last time. Last time was very contentious. This time, everybody came to the table and basically said, we are not going to get everything we wanted last time, but we do all want a bridge, and we want to make life better for people. And so just from that conversation alone, there's been a series of negotiations and trade-offs, and You know, Oregon's not getting everything that it asked for the last time, and Washington's not getting everything that it asked for last time, but we are getting a bridge. And that's the beauty of it. Both sides, both states, legislators have passed now $1 billion on each side in commitment towards the funding of the bridge. And now it's up to the federal government and the tolling to be the rest of the financial plan. But what is amazing and beautiful is that light rail will go across the bridge now and stop one stop into downtown.
Which was contentious before.
Which was very contentious and went very far north to the community college. So now it will stop. We'll get it over the bridge and it will stop and it will serve downtown and it will actually meet up with the rest of their award-winning bus rapid transit system. And it will stay 3 lanes in each direction with auxiliary lanes to help with the merge and weave movements that actually slow all of that down in the first place. So a lot of the safety issues will be reduced. And what we know nationwide is that 50% of all congestion is actually from fender benders.
Well, you know, there's a lot of opposition, people saying that it will add to more congestion and runs counter to the climate goals of the region. Just brief response to that.
This is the first multimodal interstate bridge in the country, and it will have a host of choices for everybody of how they want to travel, which is what we should be providing for the future, is choice. Some of us have to drive. Some of us have the option of taking a bus, the bus rapid transit, or now light rail on this bridge, and it will have a much better bike and ped environment in order to be able to commute back and forth. It's such an important bridge for the entire West Coast, let alone our region on economic vitality. It needs to be replaced. We don't want to wait for it to fall into the river with one small quake, right? It is sitting on old timbers in mud in the bottom of the bridge. It is safe. I don't want anybody to think it's not the same level of unsafe that the Selwood Bridge was before we replaced it, but it does need to be replaced in order to be a place where we, in a disaster even, we know we can get across and we can get supplies.
Stay tuned to that. I don't want to run out of time for you to talk about, you have decided to run as a Democratic candidate in the 5th Congressional District against the current Representative Lori Chavez Dreamer. Why?
Yeah, well, a lot of the conversation that we've just had around all of these issues in the Portland metro region, I have become extremely upset that we have not had a state and federal partner in making sure that we can move this region forward on these issues around homelessness and affordable housing and living wage jobs, let alone the fact that every time we try to have a conversation about solving these issues, we end up in a culture war over taking voting rights away or taking other human rights away. So I want to focus on the things that we're already doing at Metro and have a federal partner in that to get it done. And I'm the only one running with a vast amount of local government experience because that's who gets it done. We get a lot done at the local level. And the only one with the infrastructure background to actually get it built.
And I want to let folks know that in the future we will invite the other candidates to be on the show. I do have to ask you briefly, we only have about a minute left, that you were forced out when you were leading the Washington Department of Transportation. You were appointed in 2013 by Governor Inslee, and then the Senate majority voted not to confirm you. That's going to come up in your campaign. How do you respond to that? What happened?
Yeah, you know, when you have a very popular Democratic governor and a minority in the Senate that was not happy on the Republican side, and it was a minority. I was working very well with the moderate Republicans. In fact, they loved the initiatives that I had on practical design and being able to find a way to build a project and save money. It's very simple. And they found a way to try and disrupt the governor's administration, and it didn't work. But I got caught in the crossfire.
Well, Metro President Lynn Peterson, come back and see us later on. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for watching and listening to our podcast. Join us next week when we talk about a recently released study about Portland's Jewish community, how much it's grown, how it's changed over the years, and what it means for the future. That's next week on Straight Talk. Have a great week.